After being impressed by the improvements made in the Huawei Nova 9, its budget-friendly counterpart, the Huawei Nova 9 SE, seems to have taken some different approaches, such as adding a 108-megapixel main camera that made us curious. But do crash diets really just trim the fat? Let's take a look at why the Nova 9 SE seems to have cut back on some of its hardware by taking unhealthier dietary decisions in order to help your wallet stay fat. Right out of the box, you get the feeling like Huawei hasn't focused on using lighter materials in this version, as it now weighs 191 grams compared to the original Nova 9 of just 175 grams. In the hands, it feels slightly bigger than before and much less refined. It takes some aesthetics from Huawei's flagship, the P50 Pro, with its mirror-like design but with a bluish hue tint. While it looks great, the backplate is obviously a fingerprint magnet. Probably a trend with Huawei's releases this year with its polished type design. Even the camera bump looks slightly larger than before, housing a quad-array camera setup, and also a slightly larger 6.78-inch flat display, which to its own regard should make it feel better when handling it in the hands compared to over-the-edge curved displays. But oddly, it just doesn't feel right in the Nova 9 SE. Something about the mix of a glossy finish at the back could be the cause of this, but nothing a good casing or skin wouldn't solve. The 6.78-inch LCD display tops at a 90Hz refresh rate and a 270Hz touch sampling rate, with dynamic options available for balanced smoothness and greater battery life. While it may not resemble the clarity of an OLED, it still produces Full HD Plus resolutions, which in real-world tests makes watching 1440p content the highest standard by default, and may be an eyesore when the black bars on the side for 16:9 aspect ratio content begins to take apparent notice, as blacks are quite visible with an LCD display. Other faults, such as using YouTube via third-party apps or browsers, is still a notable factor given Google Mobile Services' absence is still a talking point even in 2022. But before we fall into that rabbit hole, we still appreciate the rich tones of this display that has a DCI P3 range up to 98%, well-balanced viewing angles, and a decent driver overall for everyday use. It's a shame that the Nova 9 SE doesn't take a step up from its sound experience either, given the mono speaker at some points feels hollow and lacks volume range for your typical Netflix stream or music listening on Spotify. While it still manages to reach a maximum reading of over 90 decibels, it still averages around 58 decibels throughout our audio tests, which isn't great, especially compared to the likes of a 4-year-old flagship that had better outputs for a good mix of mids and highs. With a newly implemented 108-megapixel to its quad-array camera construction that also consists of an 8-megapixel true chroma camera, a 2-megapixel ultra-wide, and a 2-megapixel ultra-spectrum camera, we were hopeful at the start, but results say otherwise. Given a massive resolution upgrade to 108 megapixels, it doesn't necessarily mean better outputs than the 50 megapixels in the original Nova 9. We were disappointed to see the results that came out just about average to say the least, capturing very low dynamic range when shooting outdoors and relatively overexposing most situations, such as the whites in an image. Quite a lot of detail has been lost and no longer the punchy high contrast colors we're used to seeing from a Huawei phone. Video performance takes a hard hit as well, with 4K resolution absent and topping at only 1080p. It doesn't support gyro EIS stabilization or HDR functions. Shifting exposure compensations are very noticeable and tend to produce muted colors all across the board. Perhaps not the most viable solution to increase sensor sizes to 108 megapixel, when image engines such as Huawei's XD Fusion seem to be left out of the equation in this phone. The Nova 9 SE comes with the option of 6GB or 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. The Snapdragon 680 and Adreno 610 didn't perform at its best either, only scoring 385 for single-core test and 1627 for multi-core test on Geekbench. As for OpenCL and Vulkan benchmarking, the Nova 9 SE managed to score 437 and 449. Quite below the average performer, as it only manages to score 5% better from all other devices. Real-world situations are noticeable when gaming, showing some significant drops in resolution and overall smoothness on games such as Asphalt 9. But as for casual use such as internet browsing or having multiple apps open, the Nova 9 SE has no issues in overall stability. After extensive gaming, catching up with the latest news, and TV series binging, battery life performed averagely with its 4000 mAh capacity. Quite the standard pack thrown into this mid-range phone, yet it still lasted over a day before having to charge again. It will get you back up to 100% in 45 minutes with a 66-watt fast charger that is included in the box.
We were yet to be informed of the price of the Huawei Nova 9 SE at the time of the recording, and the announcement of the price will likely be at the time of the release of this video. So we'll leave the official price in the description below and a link if you'd like to find out more. For us, it had clearly made some questionable cutbacks in order to adhere to the budget-friendly version of its predecessor. An understandable business decision given other manufacturers like Samsung has done wonders with their Fan Edition, which also has some cutbacks and a cheaper price tag. So it's no surprise that Huawei would proceed with the same approach. But does it make a good impression? In our books, not so much. Purely because of how good the original Nova 9 was and how big the improvements we felt it made from the Nova 8. So experiencing the SE version makes it feel like all that progress was left in the past in order for this to exist. A situation of good intentions, but not exactly the outcome to match. But if price and only price is your top priority, then maybe, just maybe, the Nova 9 SE might be worth taking a look at.